The wind carried the smell of rain over the endless prairie, bending the tall grass in restless waves. The sky was heavy with gray, thunder grumbling far in the distance like some old god waking from sleep. Elias Turner stood on the porch of his ranch house, hat pulled low, eyes fixed on the horizon. His hands, rough from years of rope and plow, rested on the rail as he watched the lonely road cut through the wild country. Out here, men either learned to live with silence or got swallowed by it. But tonight, the silence felt different because there, just beyond his fence line, knelt a figure too small and too still for comfort. A boy, maybe 10 years old, clutching his side and swaying like he might fall at any second. Blood stained the child's shirt that Elias's gut went tight that a wounded kid this far out could only mean trouble. Apache, Comanche, Kiowa, didn't matter which tribe. Somebody had been hurt, maybe killed, and somebody else would be coming to finish it. He stepped off the porch, boots sinking into the soft earth. The boy looked up, eyes dark as wet soil, lips trembling. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. "Help," he rasped, voice so thin Elias almost didn't hear it. That was the moment everything changed. 2 days earlier, Elias's life had been as plain as the dry bread on his table that he woke. With the sun, fed the horses, mended the south fence where the cattle had pushed through last week. At 40, he had grown used to the rhythm of lonely work, sunrise, sweat, supper, and sleep. Folks in town called him the hermit rancher. Some pitied him, some mocked him, but Elias didn't mind. He'd buried too much, his wife, Mary, taken by fever, the unborn child she'd carried, gone with her. After that, words felt useless, so he just stopped talking more than he needed to. The ranch was quiet. Always quiet. That morning, he had ridden into town for supplies. Turner, the storekeep, had greeted with a polite nod. "Storm's comin'. Best stay put a few days." Elias only tipped his hat and paid for his flour, coffee, and nails as he left. He caught the tail end of a conversation near the saloon. Two men talking low, serious. Kidnapped settler girl last week. Apache raid. Burned a wagon, killed the father. Just a matter of time before someone finds one of their brats out here. Best to let the coyotes finish him. Safer that way. Elias didn't say a word, just mounted up and rode out. But the words stuck like a burr under his collard. The next evening, the rain clouds had started rolling in. Elias had just finished chopping firewood when he heard it. A weak, pitiful sound. Like a coyote pup crying, that he followed the noise. Past the barn, through the tall grass, until he found him. The boy was on his knees, face pale, clutching a bloody gash at his ribs. His dark hair clung to his forehead, and his chest rose and fell too fast. For a moment, Elias just stood there. This was the kind of moment that decided what kind of man a person really was. Help him, and you'd be branded a fool, or worse. The town would say you'd gone soft on savages. Some men might even come out to fix the problem themselves. Leave him, and, well, no one would ever know. The boy swayed again, eyes rolling back. "Please," he whispered in halting English. Elias cursed under his breath, stripped off his coat, and dropped to one knee. "Easy now," he murmured, pressing the coat against the wound. The boy winced, but didn't fight. Elias slid an arm under him, lifting him with surprising gentleness for a man so broad-shouldered and weathered. The kid was light, too light, like he hadn't eaten right in days. He carried him toward the house, boots crunching on gravel, heart thudding harder with every step. Inside, the ranch house smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. Elias laid the boy on his own bed, lit a lantern, and fetched a basin of water. The child's breath hitched as Elias cleaned the wound, his small fists clutching at the blanket. "Name?" Elias asked softly. The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Dakota." Elias nodded. "Dakota, you're safe here. For now." The rain finally broke, hammering the roof in steady sheets. Outside, the world vanished into a blur of gray. But Elias knew better than to feel safe, because boys like Dakota didn't just wander off alone. Somewhere out there, someone was looking for him. And if they found him here, on a white man's ranch, it wouldn't matter why Elias had helped, they'd come for blood. The storm lasted through the night, drumming against the roof until dawn. Elias barely slept. He sat by the bed with his rifle leaning against the wall, eyes half closed but ears sharp to every sound outside. Takota's breathing was shallow but steady. Fever burned his small frame, yet he didn't cry out. Not once. Just a quiet, stubborn strength that reminded Elias of the wild ponies that sometimes roamed near the creek. Untamed, proud even in pain, that be why morning. The rain had passed, leaving the earth soaked and glistening under a pale sun. Elias boiled coffee, poured himself a cup, and stood by the window. The prairie stretched wide, open, and deceptively peaceful. But he knew trouble had a way of coming slow, like a shadow creeping over the land. Takota stirred, blinking awake. His gaze darted around the room, confused, afraid. "You're all right," Elias said quietly. "Stay still. You're hurt bad." The boy's lips parted like he wanted to speak, then closed again. His eyes lingered on Elias, not trusting, not distrusting, just waiting. By midday, Elias saddled his horse and rode into town. He needed bandages, medicine, things he couldn't make himself. The general store was busier than usual, folks trading stories about the storm. Elias grabbed what he needed, set it on the counter. "Boy heard something last night," the storekeep said, lowering his voice. "Couple riders passed through after dark. Said there's trouble out east. Wagon raided, man killed. Folks reckon Apache again." Elias froze. The storekeep narrowed his eyes. "Ain't seen nothing out by your land, have you?" Elias shook his head. "Just rain." The man grunted, handed him the supplies. "Best steer clear of the hills. And if you see one of their young uns, do what's smart. Don't get yourself in trouble you don't need." On the way out of town, Elias heard voices near the saloon. Saw tracks near the river. Barefoot. Could be one of theirs. "Hell, if I catch it, I'll put a bullet in its head myself. Ain't worth the trouble." Laughter followed. Elias rode past without looking at them, jaw clenched. That evening, he returned home and changed Takota's bandage. The boy winced but didn't flinch. "You eat," Elias said, setting down a plate of beans and cornbread. Takota stared at the food, hesitant. Finally, he took a small bite, then another, like he wasn't sure if it was safe to want more. Elias watched quietly. Something about it tugged at him. The way the boy ate, like every bite was a gift, like he didn't know when the next one might come. The next day, trouble arrived, not in the form of war drums or riders, but in the shape of a dusty wagon rolling up his road. Three men stepped down, neighbors from a few miles out. Tom Whitaker, lean and sharp-eyed. Hank, big and broad with a rifle slung over his shoulder. And Caleb, the youngest, still with that restless energy of a man trying too hard to prove himself. "Turner," Tom said, voice casual but eyes scanning the yard. "Heard some tracks lead in this way. Barefoot. Small. You seen anything?" Elias leaned on the fence post, hands steady. "Just deer near the creek." Hank snorted. "Ain't no deer leaving prints like that." Caleb stepped closer, peering toward the house. "Funny thing, you never get visitors. But you've been riding into town more than usual. Makes a man wonder." Elias felt his throat tighten. Tom rested a hand on his holster. "Look, Turner, we're just being neighborly. You know how this goes. One of theirs shows up, it means more'll follow. Safer for everyone if problems get handled quick." Elias didn't answer. Caleb glanced toward the barn. Wouldn't take long to check. That was when Elias stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "Ain't nothing here for you to check." For a moment, no one spoke. The wind whistled through the grass. Hank shifted his rifle on his shoulder. "You know what happens if you're lying, Turner. Folks in town won't take kindly to you harboring one of them. Could be the end of your ranch. Or worse." Elias held his ground. "Ain't lying." Tom studied him for a long moment, eyes cold but curious, like he was trying to see what kind of man Elias really was. Finally, Tom tipped his hat. "Fine. But if we find out you're keeping something you shouldn't," he let the words hang. The three men mounted up, rode off slow. Elias watched until they disappeared over the hill. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. Inside, Takota was sitting up in bed, wide-eyed. "They come for me?" he asked softly, broken English struggling past his lips. Elias hesitated, then nodded. Takota's face didn't change. He just stared down at his hands, shoulders small and tense. "They kill me if find me?" Elias didn't answer. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "You're safe," he said, though the words felt thinner than the wind outside, because deep down, Elias knew it was a lie. Sooner or later, someone would come, and when they did, he'd have to decide just how far he was willing to go for a boy who didn't belong to his world. The next 2 days passed in a fragile stillness. Elias spent the mornings tending to his cattle like nothing had changed, but every hoofbeat on the road made his chest tighten. Dakota was healing slowly. He could stand now, limping across the floor with small, careful steps. He spoke little, but his eyes followed Elias everywhere, like he was trying to read the man who'd chosen to help him. It was late afternoon when Elias heard it. Faint at first, then unmistakable. Hoofbeats, but not just one rider. Many. He stepped out onto the porch, squinting at the horizon. In the distance, a cloud of dust rolled across the open plain. The sound grew heavier, a steady rhythm of horses at a deliberate pace. Elias's stomach dropped. Dakota stepped into the doorway. Behind him, face pale. "Who?" he asked quietly. Elias didn't answer. By sundown, the riders had stopped at the ridge a half-mile out. Through the fading light, Elias counted them. At least 20, all mounted, their silhouettes dark against the blood-red sky. They didn't move closer. Didn't need to. Their presence alone said everything. Dakota stood on the porch, fists clenched. At his sides, his lips moved like he wanted to speak, but no words came. Elias placed a hand on his shoulder. Inside, that night was long and silent. Elias lit only one lantern, keeping the windows dark. He sat at the table with his rifle across his lap. Dakota curled on the bed, too restless to sleep. From far off, the mournful call of a coyote rose and fell. Then, faintly, another sound. A low, steady drumbeat. Dakota flinched, eyes darting too. "Elias, they come," he whispered. By morning, the riders were still there, waiting. Elias saddled his horse and rode out a short distance, stopping just far enough to make his intentions clear. 2 riders broke away from the group, approaching slowly. One was an older man, face marked with deep lines, eyes hard as flint. The other, a younger warrior with braids falling past his shoulders, carried a spear decorated with feathers. They halted 20 yards away. The older man spoke first, his words measured but heavy. "Boy is ours. Give him back." Elias swallowed. "He's hurt. I patched him up. Didn't know whose he was." The younger warrior's gaze was sharp. "You keep him, you make yourself enemy. You give him back, we leave." Elias glanced toward the ridge, where the rest of the riders sat waiting like wolves at the edge of a campfire. "He'll die if you move him now," Elias said. "He needs time." The older man's expression didn't change. "Not your choice." That night, tension hung like smoke. Elias sat by the fire, Dakota across from him. "They kill you," Dakota said softly. Elias didn't answer. The boy's eyes shone in the firelight. "I stay. You die. I go. Maybe they go." Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And if I send you out there, what happens to you?" Dakota looked down. "They kill me slow." The words hit harder than Elias expected. At dawn, Elias heard voices outside. Tom Whitaker and 2 other men had ridden up, rifles across their saddles. "Turner," Tom called out, voice carrying over the yard. "We heard they're camped out there. You know what that means. They'll burn you out if they think you're keeping him." Elias stepped onto the porch. "You telling me to hand him over?" he asked. Tom shrugged. "Not telling you. Just saying you're one man. They're 20. If you're smart, you won't die over someone who ain't yours." One of the other men spit in the dirt. "Hell, if you don't do it, we might just go fetch him ourselves." Elias's hand brushed the butt of his revolver. "Don't," he said quietly. Tom studied him, then shook his head. "You're a damn fool, Turner." They rode off, leaving behind only the sound of their horses fading into the distance. By evening, the war drums started again, louder this time, echoing through the hills. Dakota stood near the window, staring out at the horizon. "They wait for night," he said. Elias checked his rifle, then looked at the boy. "You got family out there?" Dakota hesitated, then nodded. "Mother, sister, but they not here. Men come, not same." Elias's jaw tightened. Whatever decision he made now, whether he kept the boy inside or handed him over, would change everything. And outside, on that lonely ridge, the riders waited for his choice. Night came heavy and cold. The sky was moonless. Stars scattered like pale ash above the dark prairie. The war drums had stopped. No voices, no hoofbeats, just a silence so deep it made Elias's ears ring. Dakota sat by the fire, staring at the flames. His face was calmer now, but his eyes looked older than they should, hardened by a life too short for that kind of weight. Elias broke the silence first. "What happened to you?" Dakota didn't answer right away. Finally, in halting English, he said, "Soldiers come. They take horses. Shoot men. My uncle fight. He die." His gaze stayed fixed on the fire. "I run. I hide. I find you." Elias felt his stomach twist. He'd heard stories in town, whispered accounts of raids where soldiers didn't care who they shot. Folks there liked to talk about savages killing settlers, but never about what settlers or soldiers had done first. "You got no father?" Elias asked. Dakota shook his head. "Long time. Dead." The boy's voice didn't waver, but Elias could hear what wasn't being said. Elias reached for the tin cup on the table, poured Dakota some coffee mixed with milk. The boy took it with both hands, sipping slow, eyes flicking up once like he didn't know whether to thank him. "You got family?" Dakota asked suddenly. Elias froze. The fire popped softly, throwing shadows across the walls. "Had a wife," he said at last. "Lost her. Lost the baby too." Dakota stared at him, head tilted slightly. "She was kind." Elias continued, voice low. "Could talk to anyone. Never met a stranger. House felt different when she was around." The boy said nothing, just listened. A faint sound outside made them both look toward the window. Footsteps. Elias grabbed his rifle and moved to the door, easing it open. Just enough to see that a single figure stood out there, hands raised, a feather tied to his braid. Dakota's eyes widened. "My uncle's friend," he whispered. Elias stepped out slowly, keeping the rifle lowered but ready. The man spoke softly in his language, glancing at the house. Dakota stepped forward to the doorway, answering back in words Elias couldn't understand. The exchange was short. Then the man turned to Elias. His English was rough but clear enough. "Boy safe. We take him. No fight. No burn." Elias's grip tightened on the rifle. "He ain't healed yet." The man's gaze was steady. "He heal with us. He die here if you keep him." Inside, Dakota stood frozen, eyes darting between Elias and the man outside. Elias crouched to meet the boy's gaze. "You trust him?" Dakota hesitated, then nodded once. Elias looked at the boy, really looked at him. The way his thin shoulders trembled just a little. The way he was trying so hard to be strong, even now. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," Elias said softly. Dakota stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, "You, good man. But I go." Elias's chest felt heavier than it had in years. That he packed a small satchel with food, wrapped the last of the cornbread in cloth, and placed it in Dakota's hands. The boy clutched it, fingers lingering like he didn't want to let go. "Thank you," he said. The words were soft, awkward on his tongue, but honest. They stepped outside together. The riders on the ridge were closer now, silent and waiting. The man with the feather placed a hand on Dakota's shoulder, guiding him toward a waiting horse. Dakota turned one last time. His dark eyes met Elias's. No words. Just a long, quiet look. A thank you, a goodbye, and something more. Elias nodded once. The boy swung onto the horse behind the man. As they rode away, Elias stood in the yard, watching until the last silhouette vanished into the night. The prairie felt emptier than it had in years. He went back inside. The fire burning low, the bed now cold and empty. On the table sat the tin cup Dakota had been drinking from. Still half full, Elias stared at it for a long time, a strange ache settling deep in his chest. For the first time in years, he wished he wasn't alone. Dawn broke slow and golden across the prairie, the sky glowing like fire along the horizon. Elias stood on the porch, hat in hand, staring at the empty ridge where the riders had disappeared hours before. The house felt too quiet. The boy's presence, his soft footsteps, the way he'd looked around like every sound mattered, had settled into the walls so quickly. Now that he was gone, the silence felt heavier than ever. Elias saddled his horse and rode out toward the creek. He didn't know why. Maybe just to see if the land still felt the same. The grass swayed in the morning wind. A hawk circled high. Above, life went on like nothing had happened. A week passed. No riders returned. No neighbors came by to ask questions. The boy's absence became part of the house, Like the missing boards on the porch or the empty chair at the table, Elias tried to fall back into his old routines, mending fences, branding cattle, boiling coffee over the fire. But every so often, he'd glance at the bed and picture Dakota lying there, his small hands gripping the blanket while Elias cleaned his wound. One night, Elias pulled out a small tin box from the shelf. Inside was the only photograph he had of Mary, her hair braided, eyes bright, hand resting gently on her round belly. He sat by the fire, turning the photo in his hand, and realized something that hit him deep. For the first time in years, he'd felt like he mattered to someone. Months rolled by. The prairie bloomed in spring, wildflowers stretching for miles. One day, while Elias was repairing the barn roof, he heard hoofbeats, steady, purposeful. He climbed down the ladder, wiping sweat from his brow. A lone rider approached, a young man with braids tied neatly, wearing a band of leather around his arm. The rider dismounted and handed Elias a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. Inside was a simple carving, a wooden horse, rough but carefully made. "He make for you," the man said in accented English. "Dakota, he say thank you. You save him. Now he live with people, with family." Elias stared at the carving, throat tight. The man gave a small nod, then mounted up and rode away without another word. That night, Elias sat on the porch with the wooden horse in his hand. The prairie stretched out before him, endless and quiet. He set the carving on the railing and leaned back, staring at the stars. For the first time in years, the loneliness didn't feel quite so sharp. Maybe he hadn't lost everything after all. Years later, folks in town would talk about the hermit rancher who'd never taken another wife, never had children of his own. But sometimes, when a band of riders passed near his land, one of them would peel away and ride up to his porch, a grown man with strong shoulders and eyes dark as wet soil. And every time, Elias would smile that quiet, rare smile, and greet him not as a stranger, but as family, because on that long-ago night, when he'd chosen to save a boy everyone else would have left to die, Elias Turner had made the one decision that mattered most. He'd given life, and in return, he'd found the family he never knew he needed.